I am live. It's the 3rd of January 2024. Vague Vacations, a travel book, Journey Through France by Joan Marshall Grant. She used to write her farm memory books. She wrote 7 of them. She passed away in 1989. This is chapter 20, Fromage Fondu. I had not eaten fromage fondu since I was 18 in Andermatt near the St. Bernard's Pass, and I wanted to see if Charles would like it, this speciality of Switzerland. We were told by the friendly waiter at the Petrol du Lac, which for its setting on a peninsula jutting into the lake and the quality of its cooking is, in our opinion, the best restaurant in Geneva, that the finest fondu is found at a small place behind the Hôtel de Berge. There were 4 varieties of fondu on the menu: plain with truffles, with mushrooms and beefsteak. We chose truffles, and while it was being prepared, studied the other participants to learn the proper technique. It looked easy enough, but so does spaghetti when absorbed in an endless stream by an Italian. With extreme deliberation, bread is cut into neat cubes until a mount of potential mouthfuls awaits the arrival of the bubbling saucepan, which is set on a small spirit stove in the middle of the table. Sparing a piece of bread on the special fork, which needs careful handling, as it is about 10 inches long with 2 sharp and narrow prongs, the operator dips it into the molten cheese, gives it a practiced twirl, pauses for a moment to let it cool, and finally pops it into his mouth, withdrawing the fork through clenched teeth to break off the cooling threads, which are already the consistency of chewing gum. When our saucepan arrived, we hoped that we should encounter none of the obvious obstacles, but this proved too hopeful a view. Either one waited too long, in which case strings of congealing cheese trailed across the table, or if the bolus proved too hot and one dared not close the teeth, aerials were suspended between fork and mouth, or flapped unbecomingly against the face. We had ordered a half portion, but even that was beyond our capacity. No doubt at 18, hungry from my efforts to ski, I had been either more capacious or more greedy. We looked with awe, not untinged with horror, at the man next to us, who commenced his meal with a vast plate of noodles, and then tackled a double fondue with gusto, which carried him onto the last scrapings of the saucepan. If he had been a navy, it might have been easier to understand, but he was obviously from an office, and so could not expect to walk it off during the afternoon. The atmosphere was purposeful to the point of solemnity, but without the erudition we had found in some restaurants of France. There were no signs of enthusiasm, but only a determined munching, a steady stoking of the stomach, rather than the gustation of the gourmet. Replete to the point of somnolence, we both pretended we must spend the afternoon writing letters. It was sunset when we woke. Chapter 21, I'll start this. It was very short. Psychiatrist's son. It was still warm enough to sit outside a cafe even at 10 o'clock. In front of us, an avenue of electric standards, each decorated with a crow's nest of pink geraniums, provided a conduit for a stream of autored aristocracy. Packard and Cadillac, Delahaye and Bugatti, too large, too arrogant for people used to the shabby transport of convalescent countries. We had seen a few such cars in Paris, but here they swarmed around as though Geneva was their breeding ground. A parrot woman and a man with mandrel blue jowls swept down the steps, ignored their chauffeur, and settled themselves among grey cushions. "It is sad that money flows so easily into the wrong pockets," I remarked. "Even the Romans had some kind of taste. That woman appears to have bathed in Chanel 5, but the stink of the blacker markets still cling to her furs." Charles laughed. "And what furs? It must have needed a pack of blue foxes to cover so large an area from neck to calves, and her calves would overwork 1,000 silkworms." "Not silk, nylon," I said. "One must be accurate, even when describing monsters. They should be riding in a tumbrel. "Rather a harsh view," said Charles. "Revolutions seldom do any real good. But I agree that such people unwittingly act as agents provocateurs for the crooked politicians who want to defend public feelings away from their own criminal incompetence. If I had an empty belly, I'd throw a brick as fast as the next man if I was told loud enough where to throw it." Charles, who, like most people of Irish blood, takes a certain emotional ease from the contemplation of catastrophe, proceeded to draw a highly coloured picture of rich and poor alike, plunging into the chasm of their mutual ignorance. I found it sufficiently depressing to make an outside conversation desirable, and the young man at the next table seemed the most likely subject. For half an hour he had been staring gloomily at a manuscript, while his neglected coffee grew cold. Perhaps he was an undiscovered genius who required self-confidence, or a potential suicide I should rescue from the rear. At least this was a more pleasing fantasy than the sad immensities of sociology and politics. When he joined us, he explained that the manuscript, which I had used as an opening move, was part of a radio play. He frankly disliked his job, so he was probably not very good at it, which may have accounted for his low salary. Charles, having once been an announcer at Radio Luxembourg, discussed technicalities with him until he lost the shyness which had seemed his chief characteristic. But after some minutes the conversation languished, and I began to think that Patver had played no part in the introduction. Charles ordered 3 cognacs, and when they arrived the young man refused with unnecessary vehemence, and then stammered apologies for his apparent discourtesy. "I'm still afraid of alcohol," he said with obvious embarrassment. My interest revived. Had I found a dipsomaniac? The blunt question is sometimes a useful shortcut, so I asked, "Why are you afraid?" He hesitated and then broke out with, "I'm afraid of my father. He is not healthy. It is not healthy to hate anyone so much." "Having one's relations is quite usual," I remarked soothingly. "Hating one's relations is quite usual," I remarked soothingly. "Most people do. That's why they insist on such elaborate funerals to hide their relief. Too often the dear departed is dear only when the departure is decisive." "My father is devilish. He makes people so afraid of him that they become obedient. Then he can proclaim that he has been clever enough to cure them when other doctors have failed. He enjoys people saying he is clever." A question from Charles produced the information that the father was a psychiatrist who ran a clinic in another part of Switzerland. I have not seen him for 5 years, but I cannot stop thinking that he is waiting to get me back. I should have become mad if I had stayed there, for my father thinks there are no sane people. To him nothing is simple and ordinary. He watched every trivial gesture I made. Even the way I put on a hat or lit a cigarette was significant and meant something horrible. Drink is always an escape mechanism, and he probed until he convinced me I would die a drunkard. He has no heart, only a brain exact as a chronometer. "Then how does he get patients?" I said. "You told me, I think, that it was his own clinic." "They stay with him because they enjoy being bullied. There are many people who will give their souls to anyone who is powerful enough to take away their responsibilities. They think of him as a god because they are too stupid to see he is their Führer. It would be justice if he and Hitler were put together on a desert island. What happens to the patients who prefer to keep their souls? I said gently. He shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps they hate him as much as I do. There was no need to prompt him with further questions, for we were already the necessary channel for his repressed emotions. I know I'm not much good, from his point of view. I'm not clever. I do not work very hard. I like to have my own opinions, even if they are wrong, without having to justify them. But I have my soul. I will not degrade love into transference and kindness into psychic insurance. My enemies are not scapegoats, and my friends are not mirrors showing me the qualities I would like to have. I'm not a dirty little pipe for libido. He stared in front of him as though seeing something he had tried to forget. He made my brother become a pastor because he said he had potential religious mania which must be given an outlet. My brother will not speak to me anymore. He says I'm an atheist because I do not go to church. His voice rose. They are the same, these men of cold power. They're all the same. What difference is there between one of them who is a politician or an economist or an industrialist and another who trades more directly on the soul? They all share the same tyranny, and against them alone is a fight worthwhile. They are the makers of armies and the brains who give to the masses hatred and jealousy instead of understanding and cooperation. It was an hour before he suddenly smiled and asked whether he might change his mind and have a cognac with us. Sometimes it is not good to be silent too long, he said. Even hatred gets a little thin after one has taken it out into the air and seen that it is pitiable to waste so much time on becoming strong enough to be worthy of hatred. The next chapter is entitled Iced Port, but I stop this here. Have a lovely 3rd of January.